Hello again and welcome to the Knowledge Panel episode 22, and today it's technical SEO and quick wins. As you can see, my background here, I'm actually doing the show from North Wales, from Snowdonia, instead of my normal location. But nevertheless, it's good to see you all. Hope that the internet connection holds up in Snowdonia. And we've got a fantastic panel today. Unfortunately, Sara couldn't make it, but it doesn't. I'm not too worried. Well, I'm sorry for Sara; she's called away for an emergency. But Wilhemina and Kara, we were chatting before the show, and I think we've got some some absolutely incredible experience within the world of technical SEO. So I think we're going to be in pretty safe hands today. So Wilhemina and Kara, welcome to the Knowledge Panel show. Why don't we start off by you guys introducing yourselves? Kara, why don't you go first? Tell us, who are you and where do you come from, as the show panel host says.
Cool, thank you. Firstly, thank you for having me. Very honored to be here. So my name's Kara McClure. I'm currently at an agency called Mindshare as SEO account director. I lead on a few big clients, Apple being one of my main clients. Yeah, I think that's everything.
So I think we can't go, SEO for Apple. That's pretty cool. Wilhemina, can you beat it?
I absolutely can't beat it. So I'm Wilhemina, an SEO specialist at British American Tobacco, and I work across the UK and Ireland accounts.
So I mean, it's not exactly a small company either. So that both of you have got some incredible challenges. Both of you, different kinds of technical challenges, I would imagine. We were talking about age restrictions and things like that before we came on the show. And Apple, you were talking about doing technical SEO in Python and things, Kara. So maybe we'll come on to some of those ideas. But before I do, I want to just bring in my producer, make sure that I have talked about all the things I need to do before we start, and say hello and thanks for coming and stopping me from making too many errors, David.
The only one thing I want to say is you're probably listening to the show on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. Come and join us live next time, if that's you. Just go to theknowledgepanelshow.com, sign up for the next show, and hopefully we can see you interacting as part of the live chat for the next show. And I'll tell you more about what the next episode is towards the end of this one.
Okay, brilliant. So let's get into the show and start with question one, which is, if people haven't got time to be around for the whole show, and we wanted one technical SEO quick win that you wanted people to take away, what would you go for? So one idea that people can go for to take away as a technical SEO quick win, and I'll go with Kara again.
Yeah, there's so much. I guess I would say the main thing, and it's probably quite maybe an old school or basic one, is make sure your Google Search Console is configured in the best way possible, because that actually gives you a lot of insight that people kind of overlook sometimes. And I think if there's anything technically wrong with your site, Search Console is going to flag it up to you, and you're going to be able to, get a bit under the hood and be able to fix certain things. So I would say, yeah, make sure your Google Search Console is configured correctly.
So is that really just mostly about setting up the just setting up the domains? Because the domains you used to be able to have different. I remember with my Majestic days, we had https://majestic.com and then en.majestic.com and jp.majestic.com and every single virtual one under the sun, most of which did nothing, but I had to put them all in. Is that still the case, or have they fixed that now?
It's still the case to a certain extent. So you have to still configure it to whether you sit on HTTP or HTTPS. Hopefully, everyone should be on HTTPS now for obvious reasons. So that thing is fine. But in terms of the configuration, I was more referring to making sure it's linked to Google Analytics, making sure it's linked to any other analytics tools that you have, making sure the core Web Vital stuff is all, kind of organized in the way that you need it to. So if anything is flagged up, then you understand it. Because Search Console will give you, I guess, the good visualization of how search engines are looking at you, predominantly Google, right, which is what everybody cares about. So I just think if anything technical needs to be flagged before you even get to the fixing, Search Console is one of my go-tos all the time.
Okay, good tip. Wilhemina, what's your one tip for the top of the show?
One tip. It's quite a hard one.
Okay, I think we've we seem to have lost a connection a little bit there. Is that me or is that Wilhelmina?
I think it's Wilhemina.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, but okay, we seem to have lost Wilhelmina. We'll carry on, you and I, Kara. We've now got a down to two.
No
I don't know
pressure,
what to.
no
No,
pressure.
don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We'll sort it out in post production. Don't panic. Let's carry on with the Search Console then.
Yeah.
Because there's also Bing Webmaster tools as well, which is
Yes.
kind of you get a lot of people saying, "Oh, you should check out Bing as well as Search Console," and then I don't suppose many people do. I mean, do you? Does Apple?
Yeah, I mean, I do use Bing Search Console, not necessarily for Apple, but I have used it in the past.
Okay.
And I think obviously I'm not sure how much people will take note of, the market share space. Particularly because a lot of laptops now that you buy, and even some smartphones that you buy, some of them come loaded with certain browsers, and within those browsers, sometimes I know for Microsoft for a time they were giving everyone their laptops loaded with Bing. And obviously, if you're loaded with Bing, then people are predominantly just going to use that because people are lazy, right? So people shouldn't necessarily overlook the other search engines. Obviously, their market share is obviously minuscule compared to Google, but there still is a little bit of market share. So I think, yeah, Bing Webmaster Tools is also another one. I haven't used it recently, if I'm being perfectly honest, but I have used it in the past, and it does give you some good insights as well. Because I think with technical SEO, I think the main thing that you need to understand is understanding that like what is happening behind the scenes, and Webmaster Tools or Search Console is going to tell you that.
Excellent. Wilhelmina, sorry, you seem to have a crash there. Are you back?
Yeah, mid speech.
Never
you
mind.
hear
Let's
me?
go again. We can. I think. Yeah. Just jump in. Tell us your tip.
I would say there's so many, but I would say don't underestimate the importance of a sitemap. That would be my tip.
Okay. All right. I guess on a large site that becomes
Can I cut
even
out
more
again?
important. No, I'm just about getting you there. So have you got any particular tools you like to use to generate sitemaps, or are you lucky enough to have a CMS that does it all properly?
Hello?
Yep.
Hello?
Well, I can kind of hear you.
I feel like it's frozen for me.
I think you're still there.
Okay. Yeah, you're still here, but I'll jump in. Well, okay, I'll pass it over to Kara for a bit. Wilhelmina, maybe if you can turn off your video settings, then we'll get it all right for the podcast and stuff, and that might save some bandwidth. And perhaps we can go on from there. But
Yeah.
Kara, I mean, do you guys use sitemaps a lot?
Yeah. To be honest, when you asked the question, I was toying between Search Console or Sitemaps, but I think I'll still go with Search Console from the essence of seeing what's under the hood, essentially. With Sitemaps, I think the good thing about Sitemaps is, again, you're still telling you're telling search engines what's going on, right? You're telling them every single page that you want them to look at. You're telling them what they want to index and that kind of thing. And I know we mentioned WordPress before we jumped on live, and the one interesting thing I found with WordPress, I haven't used it recently, but from what I understand, you have to use plugins for WordPress to be able to actually generate sitemaps. Whereas obviously, if you build it on a different kind of CMS, you can auto generate an XML sitemap, for example, or a HTML sitemap. And I think that's probably one of the downfalls of WordPress not generating an auto generated XML sitemap, because I think it's quite important. So I was actually auditing a site the other day, and they just didn't have a sitemap. You just couldn't find a sitemap anywhere. And it's quite a large website. And then I came to find that they were built on WordPress, and that's not obviously great for SEO.
Okay, but I kind of just, I guess, pushing back because there's only two of us now, so we're just gonna have to just agree to
Yeah.
disagree.
Yeah.
But so many people use WordPress that I
Mm.
would imagine that Google's ability to crawl WordPress is incredibly easy. What advantages does a sitemap have for Google, surely it can get through the content pretty easily, because one of the things about WordPress and plugins is, another SEO will tell me every time we put another plugin, you put a nail in the coffin of SEO for WordPress, because it just sort of slows the site down. Although I
Yeah.
suppose a sitemap plugin wouldn't necessarily slow a site down very much, because it's just creating an extra page. But
Mhm.
even so, what are the advantages of having the sitemap, do you think?
I think, yeah, I guess WordPress is a bit of a anomaly within the field, but for me personally, the advantages of having a sitemap is, again, it has a date, it has a time, it has a stamp. You're literally updating search engines every time you've made a change. So using Apple, for example, whenever they launch new products on their site, which they do often, as I'm sure if anyone's an Apple fan, they would know, it's particularly around September or March when they're releasing new products. We kind of auto push and submit all the new sitemaps, so all of those URLs can be indexed straight away.
Right.
And obviously, if a site like Apple is doing that, then you understand how important it is. Because in the grand scheme of things, for me, I think the technical SEO, the standpoint is always you're constantly communicating with the search engine bots, and that's the best way to do it, for a technical aspect of making sure things are being indexed. But in saying that, yeah, you do make a good point in terms of, obviously, Google are good at understanding WordPress sites, calling WordPress sites. So then I guess it's more about how well technically built is your website on WordPress. So
Okay.
you may not necessarily have to rely on a sitemap. But I guess if you have it, it's a nice to have.
So if you put out a sitemap and you miss out a bunch of URLs, does that preclude, does Google just then not bother with those, or is it just going to still find those through discovery, through crawl discovery, and add that into the mix? Unless you, of
Yeah.
course.
I guess it's not the fact that they wouldn't bother with it, but it may potentially take them longer to find them. I guess it depends on what signals you're sending, right? If you're sending loads of offsite signals and on-page signals, then I'm pretty sure that Google will probably notice the URL at some point. Obviously, depending on your crawler budget, how often your site is crawled, it all depends on a lot of those different things as well. So I wouldn't necessarily say if your URLs aren't in the sitemap, they won't necessarily be noticed at some point, but for me, I think technical SEO is all about being able to be in control. And I think when you have things like Search Console set up properly and sitemaps, you're able to control a bit more. Of course, Google are always going to do what they want to do, because let's be honest, Google don't like SEOs. But you're anything that's going to allow you to be in control, I would say just get that under your belt, just so you can try and influence as much as possible. Because the other standpoint is, yeah, making sure you've got strong optimization on site and off site, to make sure that your URL is noticed if it hasn't been submitted through the sitemap.
So, I mean, sitemaps, when in days gone by, used quite a lot of. I could use priorities in sitemaps. I don't think that's available now. So sitemaps are all about getting discovered and getting indexed in the first place. Really, they're not. There's nothing in a sitemap that can tell you some priority. It can tell a search engine a priority or your preference of one
No.
page over another these days, because you used to be able to give a number between 0 and 1 in a sitemap as to the priority, but I think that was a long time ago. But it seemed to never do anything anyway, and that's probably why they took it away. So,
Yeah.
well, we'll try one more time with Wilhemina. How are you, Wilhemina? If you're online and fine, give us a tip and just chat away. If we fail again, don't worry about it.
I don't know why my internet is working against me today, or in this moment actually. But I'm back on. I can hear everyone. I can see everyone. I think you can hear me as well.
Yeah, but give us a tip.
Right.
Oh no, you've done sitemaps. No, we've just done sitemaps while you were off. So we can move on. If you've got another thought, then we'll jump onto that one though.
No, we can move on. Yeah, I'm happy to
Okay,
move on.
that's all right then. Okay, so let's go on to 404s. Well, it kind of moves on from we've lost Wilhemina. I think we'll probably go without Wilhemina for now.
She should be still there actually, but I just asked her to turn off her camera to try and get the.
Okay, that's great. So let's go on to the consequences of setting up new sitemaps. Presumably, if you're going to put up a new sitemap, you're also going to in that time take some content down, so you're going to start ending up with 404s on pages, or if you've been cleverer about it, 301s. But I suppose with something like Apple, if you've got new versions of software, do you still or new versions of products, does Google, or does Apple prefer to remove URLs for redundant products or redundant content, or do they like to redirect it? And whether that's Apple's view or your view, what's your view, Kara?
Yeah, I guess I'll give my view on this one, just because I don't want to get too into the detail of Apple, because
Sure. Yeah, I'll stop
can't.
querying Apple too much now.
I can't share, all of Apple's
Yeah.
secrets. But in a general sense, I think, again, with the sitemaps, I guess it depends how you manage it, whether it's auto-generated or whether you manually manage it. And I guess also depends on how massive your site is. What I will say, which I think is quite a good tip, is depending on how big your website is, you should have separate sitemaps for separate parts of your website. So you can easily, if you understand that, you've got loads of products, have a product sitemap. If you've, got a particular, loads of categories, have a category sitemap. Maybe try and segment it out. So if you know that there is going to be an instance where you may decide to take a whole load of products off your page, for example, you can refer straight to the product sitemap and then edit that accordingly. So I would say if it's manageable to edit the sitemap, then yes, of course, remove them from the sitemap. So Google can then, in turn, remove them from the index. But personally, how I generally manage 404s is by redirects, because I think, again, with the sitemaps, depending on how things are set up, especially if you're an agency and you've got to get free developers and you may not have access to the sitemap, you may not have access to the CMS, you may not have access to certain things. I think redirects is probably still one of the stronger signals to send to Google to say, hey, this URL used to live here, but actually it lives over here now. And obviously, the difference between a 301 and a 302. So if I use like sale as an example. A lot of my clients have been retail, like e-commerce, and they have sales a lot of the time, right? So it's more their page may go down temporarily for a sale, so we'd implement a 302. But then if we know that a page is permanently being moved for whatever reason, then we'd use a 301. So yeah, but in terms of 404s, more than likely you're going to implement a 301 because it's an error page, and if it's not coming back, then you just send that signal to and hopefully, and what does generally happen is a lot of the authority, depending on how long the page has been a 404 for, then you'll be able to kind of, I guess, mitigate as much loss as possible, and be able to say, for example, if the page has been a 404 for 2 days, if you implement a redirect, you're probably not really going to lose out. If it's been a 404 for like a month, there's probably going to be a lot more that you would have lost. So I would say implement redirects as quickly as possible for when it becomes a 404. And yeah, just manage that process, and I guess just have a clear logical step of understanding whether you want to put a 301 or a 302, and just things like that.
Sorry, excuse me. And is Google Search Console giving you messages when you get 404s that are important? Is that sitting there in Search Console as well?
Yeah, it does. But I guess the only thing that I haven't, unless someone can tell me how, you can't really set up alerts within Search Console and get notifications. So you have to go in there. But then it gives you quite a good understanding of server errors. So even down to if you do manage your sitemap, if you submitted URLs within the sitemap that are throwing up errors, Search Console will tell you that. If you have 500 errors, it will tell you that. It gives you a lot, and that's why I say Search Console is a good. I think it's just a good kind of Bible to have with technical quick wins, right? Because the other side is running loads of crawls, and doing that thing, which you can do as well. But again, depending on your site, depending on your server size, depending on your server logs, could slow things down. Whereas Search Console is just always plugged in, so it's an easier thing.
Wilhemina, are you there to talk about redirects? How you approach redirects?
I am here. If you can hear me.
We can.
Perfect. Yeah, so just in terms of like redirects and how we use them, like Kara was saying, when to basically use them. So they are permanent redirects. Again, something to use if you know this is where something is going to be permanently used. Again, it depends on where you want to use it. So how do you want to use it? So just like in context, and how do you want to use it?
So I've heard from a Googler, I'm not going to say which one, that they're now treating 301s and 302s as the same. well, firstly, do you think they do? And secondly, do you think they should?
I don't think so. No, I don't think they should be treated as the same thing. I feel like they should be kept separately, like the way they are now. Also kind of helps again because the whole point of it is to kind of like figure out where that page is going. So if you know it's a permanent, then use it. And if you know it's not going to permanent, then use it to keep those two things separate as well. So it gives people that chance to use it separately, then combining them both together.
Yeah, I agree. Kara, do you think they should be different? They should always be different. There's a real good reason for them to be different.
I guess, what do you mean in terms of they should or shouldn't be different?
Well, so the Googler was saying that they effectively will treat a redirect as a redirect, regardless whether it's temporarily or permanent for their search engines. And I was surprised to hear that. It was a little while back. I was surprised to hear that, and I was surprised that somebody else from Google didn't come down and make that perfectly clear that these are different things. And if they're not different things, why on earth there's a good reason for having a temporarily out of stock 302, permanently out of stock 301. There's good reasons for having different commands, and I'm just surprised that Google treats it differently. I suppose from their point of view, all they need to know is whether to show it in the search results or not.
Yeah. To be honest, I have heard murmurs of that in terms of it doesn't actually really matter. You redirect as a redirect. But I've always been on the notion of, I think it's still important to set the status code because there are other redirect codes you can have as well. There's a 308 that people don't really speak about. So me personally, I would still use the logic and the process that I have, which is either a 301 or a 302. If I think obviously the balance between it is, if you don't know when a URL has come back, just put a 301. If you do know that it's a temporary, then put a 302. But I have heard murmurs that it doesn't necessarily differentiate. But there's nothing to really prove that at the moment. So I guess people with most things in SEO, to be honest, I know you don't want to hear this, but it depends. Like it does depend because it's kind of like there's no black or white, right or wrong. Obviously there's a lot of things that we all do that are similar, that we know not what to do within SEO, and there's some things that we know to do. But in that sense, it's like, there's a lot of gray areas around a lot of things because Google are never really going to give us a definitive answer because, like I said, they don't like SEOs, right? Because they don't make money out of us. We are the ones to work out how they do what they do so we can manipulate for our client, or if we're in-house or whatever. So I still stand firm that I think you should state the status code. But I do understand where people are coming from that say doesn't necessarily matter.
Fair enough. All right, let's move on to duplicate content then. Wilhemina, is that something that you guys have to tackle a lot, or you don't have that problem? 2 URLs with the same content. I mean, large websites must have it just in parameters, must be appearing all over the place. How do you handle or mitigate duplicate content, Wilhemina? You're on mute. You're either on mute or dead. Offline.
No,
There we go. There you
go. So thankfully, duplicate content isn't something that we enter quite a lot. We try to make sure that all our content is different from the others. In some cases where I have experienced it, it's I don't know how to mitigate it, but to basically make sure that even if we do need to have the content in more than one place, it comes from different sources, if that makes sense.
Okay, and I guess also, Kara, do you guys use canonicals at all in content, for example?
Yeah, interestingly, one of my other clients has got an issue at the moment with duplicate content because they're basically acquiring a lot of content from another website and they don't have the resource to rewrite the content. So they're essentially copying all the content from another website, totally different domain. And one of the things I was discussing is usually I would suggest canonicals. But me personally, I've never had experience of implementing a canonical to a different domain. It's always within the same domain. So because this is two separate websites, my first reaction is to, implement canonicals to let Google know that this is the more authoritative page that you should be looking at. But I'm not sure how Google are going to feel about that because it's two separate domains. So canonicals is kind of my go-to. But I think within duplicate content, and this is probably going to sound quite funny, but my main thing about how to manage duplicate content is just don't have it. Because it's like, it's not very wise to have it. It's just not best practice. It's it's not logical. It doesn't. Why would you have, I always kind of refer to SEO as a book. Sometimes when you read books, you don't have 2 pages that's exactly the same thing, because that messes up the story. Why would you have that? So yeah, how I manage duplicate content is tell my clients don't do it. But if they do it, then canonicals would be one. And then the other is to, sometimes they have duplicate content and they're not really sure why they have it. So sometimes you can actually edit content to, differentiate it from one another. So I recommend that as well. But yeah, I think canonicals are going to be the best way. Or you can, I've done content audits before where I've, seen, okay, you may have duplicate content, but how many pages do you really need? Let's actually do an audit and maybe archive some of these pages, or redirect some of these pages, get rid of some of these pages, and then re-optimize some of the other content as well. So yeah,
I see duplicate content happening a lot when well, again, particularly on WordPress sites where people have put in a post and associated with more than one category, and that automatically will create 2 URLs which essentially have the same content, and there's ways around that. Well, within WordPress, I'm sure you can use plugins. You can use plugins to stop that from happening, or the best thing to do is not to put one article in 2 categories. But also recently, I've been seeing, probably not something that large organizations would like, but I've seen people doing those kind of redirects on the edge and on Cloudflare and these kind of things. So if all of a sudden a category turns up that's a sort of an old category, it'll redirect actually at the DNS level, which I'm sure would scare the heck out of some organizations, but it's quite a powerful way to do SEO.
Yeah, no, there is that. I think, I guess it depends on, the level of duplication, right? And I guess how aggressive, like you said, it would scare people. Like, I guess it depends on how aggressive do you want to go with the duplicate content, and that's why I say my advice is just don't have it, because you alleviate a lot of issues. Because I get it from some standpoint. Sometimes duplicate content is sometimes it's unavoidable. Again, working on some large sites, there's issues where we have, I guess, a bit of a separate issue, but there'll be like loads of duplicate meta descriptions, for example, because if they sell a mass amount of products, but the only differentiation is the color or something, they're not really going to write a different meta description for every single URL just because they've got it in blue, red, black, green, and yellow.
So are you lamenting the Google Search Console dropping the parameter thing? So somewhere in Google Search Console, you used to be able to say, right, please ignore any parameters that says color equals or whatever, and they've dropped that. Is that something you lament, or or you think they get it right all the time?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with that, I more rely on robots.txt for things that we want to be ignored or disallowed in the SERPs. And to be honest, I guess it depends on how the parameters are rendered, because some parameters just aren't rendered in search because they're quite ugly URLs and they've got loads of different characters and that kind of thing. So I guess it depends on if you know for a fact that your parameter URLs are being indexed, or they're being rendered in a particular way where people are going to land on them, then I would then fix it. But also disallow it in the robots.txt, right? Because with Google, doing what they did in Search Console. And to be honest, I wasn't really convinced of how accurate that function in Search Console was anyway. I think for me, I like to have things a bit more succinct and a bit more black and white, and I think robots is the better way to go.
I find Google ignores so many bits of robots.txt though that I get, and it was never an official system, really, was it? So it's kind of it's kind of optional for search engines, really. So it's not ideal. But yeah, but with SEOs, where nothing's ideal, really, as you say, you know. It is what it is.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. It is what it is. And I think we with that, going back to my point before of, saying, not what you want to hear, but it depends. It's more so because even down to, like, meta descriptions, Google are now, deciding what meta description they want to put in. So you can
Yeah.
implement a whole bunch of meta descriptions, but actually Google may decide to go on the URL that you've written that meta description for and take a chunk of your text that's on page, and they think that's the
Yeah.
better meta description. So yeah,
And they're
and
doing a lot. They're doing it like 60% of the time, or 40 to 60% of the time. I've
yeah,
seen a couple of different surveys and things. So it's huge. But when we looked at when I saw a study when they were looking at the change that they made, most of the changes were were sensible changes. So they were helping the user at the far end. But it was a shock to the SEO community when they started changing your content on the fly.
yeah,
Which kind of, I guess it would have been an interesting one to put back to Wilhelmina, because that might affect. She's in a regulated industry, so
mm,
are there going to be occasions where a search engine may inadvertently cause especially somebody in a regulated industry, to be breaking the law because they legally have to say something in a description, for example.
yeah. No, that's interesting actually, because I had the issue with one of my clients, and there's a restriction that they have from a dimensions point of view within particular markets. They have to kind of state the dimensions of a product, and that, because of Google doing whatever they wanted to do, we would put it in the meta description, but it wouldn't always show because Google decided to take something else. But I guess, obviously I can't speak for Wilhelmina, but I'm assuming within her industry, whatever needs to be put out there, they would have on site anyway. So there would be some type of hope that if Google are, pulling from on page, then it would pull the right thing.
Yeah.
Or at least pull something. But yeah, and I think that's why I think, being within SEO, and I'm not sure if you know about the latest update, the Google Mum update,
Hmm.
which is all very, wishy-washy, as it always is. um I think the more and more updates that come, I think from a technical standpoint, it's about just making sure that your site is, technically sound and the most accessible, because that's even though Google are never going to give you the clear answer, that's exactly what they care about. They care about the user, right? All of these updates that are coming out, the update before was about the product reviews, and there's so much that they're trying to do just to serve the user and give the user everything that they need without the user working too much, or the person who's Googling working too much. I think with anything to do with technical thing, you just have to make sure your site's built correctly and you're able to understand everything that's going on under the hood, so things are accessible for the user. And then I guess that kind of
Yeah.
crosses over into CRO, but that's a whole separate conversation.
Yeah, but I think that also that comes to the heart of philosophy of SEO, though, doesn't it? As a potential problem for a search engine in the end, because hear me out here, because this is old man talking here, but it's like they've given us so many hoops to jump through, like making sure that all your images are well tagged and all these things are done right. You've got schema on the page, or you've got things in bullet points, and you write in a style. And what's starting to happen is that in most markets, pages that are not optimized, that were not ever designed to be optimized, are never going to reach the top of the SERPs. But the interesting thing for me is that the real authority on any particular subject doesn't give a flying fig about the SERPs, and they're just going to write about life on Mars or whatever their specialist topic is, and if Google doesn't understand the author of that content, or doesn't know that, they'll never get to show that to the people. So they're actually shooting themselves in the foot by telling everybody to do CRO and UX, because it's only the ones that do it that then show up in the SERPs, and therefore you actually suppress the actual authoritative content. Is that old man talking, or do you think I've got something to say there?
No. I mean, I'm never going to call you old man. It's offensive.
I would.
But yeah, no, I wouldn't say it's crazy what you're saying. I think, again, it goes back to that whole point of it depends, right? Because you're going to do depending on what you do. I think a lot of the time, and I think the why, because a lot of people ask me, why do you even do SEO? Like, there's so much that's just like, it's a long-term channel gain. There's so many factors that can impact things. Google can literally just pull the rug from under your feet at any given moment. But I think for me, it's about, especially from a technical standpoint, it's, think of technical SEO as like a house. Like, the technical SEO is the foundation that people don't see when they come to your house. The brickwork, the electrics, the plumbing, all of that stuff, the stuff that keeps your house structurally going. And everyone just cares about, the wallpaper, the flooring, the sofa, the TV, or whatever. But it's about understanding that within that standpoint of, if they are being told to do CRO, if they are being told to do stuff like that, I guess it's similar to how a builder would be told, or an architect would be told to how to draw up a plan for a house. Because you're told that, to make it accessible. Because at the end of the day, right, everybody's website, if it's an e-commerce website or if you make revenue from it, you want people to convert. So it's one thing to make your website discoverable and make sure your website can be indexed in the SERPs and on the first page. Although there's a lot of studies now that even second page is the place to be, but who knows?
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Well, as in, people are getting more, I think searchers are getting a little bit more inquisitive with their searches. So if they're searching for something, and obviously Google's changing the SERP so much now, there's so much above the fold. There's map results, there's feature snippet results, there's people also ask results, there's video results, there's so much, there's social media results, there's knowledge panels, there's so much stuff
Yeah.
that can come into that play. And I think some people, I guess, I don't think there's any stats that have come out about it yet, but there probably will, because we've been having a lot of discussions about it as to how far do people scroll now. And there was that time when Google, I think they trialed the scroll where you didn't even have to click on a page, you just kept
Infinite
scrolling.
scroll.
Yeah, exactly. You just kept scrolling, and you didn't know what page you were on. You could be on page 4, but you were just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. So within the CRO, I think it definitely goes hand in hand. And I think I remember doing a project for Selfridges on conversion, like just working with UX a lot more. And I was like, guys, like, we should probably work a lot more closely together, because we're the ones focused on bringing all the traffic to your site, and you're the ones focusing on converting people. But if the two aren't matching, then it's not going to work, because I can drive 1 million visits to your site in a week, but if your navigation is poor, then no one's gonna want to convert.
Then no one goes from there. And I think there's something you might have something in by saying that people are digging deeper into the search results, because I've been surprised recently at a couple of non-SEOs who said, "Oh, I never click on ads. I go straight past the ads." So and because Google has put so many ads up there now, you've got to consciously scroll down to see anything except for ads, and a lot of the time, so that puts people in the habit of digging into the results a little bit more. So you may well be correct on that. It'd be interesting to see those studies. I think if we find one, we'll put it in the comments on various podcasts if we can, or put it back on the Knowledge Panel Show's website at least. So okay, I'm just going to finish up. I think with I wanted to talk a little bit about crawlers, but I don't think we've got time. Well, we'll actually maybe we'll, because we might have to do some editing because of Wilhemina's technical challenges. So do you use crawlers much yourself? Screaming Frogs or Sitebulb or OnCrawl or those kind of things? And if so, what do you use, and what do you like about them?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably going to sound really sad, but I love crawlers, because crawlers tell me what I need to know, right? And Screaming Frog, I guess, is my main day-to-day that I would just crawl to check some stuff. I think for me, I've got to the point of using the more advanced features of Screaming Frog that probably people don't look at. So building regex, building XPaths, extracting a lot of different things that you need from it. So Screaming Frog is definitely a go-to for me. Also use Deep Crawl. Deep Crawl have actually advanced themselves quite a lot. Based on when I used to use the tool when I first stepped into the industry, it's definitely come a long way.
And they're really good for large sites, aren't they? Not
exactly.
Screaming Frog for a large site.
But they don't. So if I want to do a large, like a big massive crawl on a huge site, I would set the crawl for Deep Crawl and let it run overnight. If I'm just trying to find something really quickly, I'll just grab it from Screaming Frog. But yeah, those are the two tools that I would use. And I guess slightly off topic a little bit, but I think log file analysis is definitely a big thing that people don't look into from a technical SEO aspect. And within that, Botify is probably one of the best tools I've seen that do that. So yeah, and again,
What do you find in log files that you don't find in web crawlers? A lot of those 500 responses properly.
yeah, a lot of 500 responses. It's interesting because the log file analysis, I guess it just gives you a more detailed view of how search bots are actually looking at every single thing that happens when it, comes to your website, crawls all your pages, and kind of deciphers and I guess puts it in its own little database of whatever it feels. I think with the log file analysis, you're literally getting, I guess, deeper into the hood or under the hood of understanding how your website is being treated from a bot perspective, and you're being able to manage 500s, because even with search console stuff like that, it will flag up 500 errors. But I think log file analysis is a lot more real time. So
Yeah.
if you've had some 500 errors, they may have only been flagged up in search console a day or two later, whereas with log file analysis, it's a lot, I think a log file analysis is a lot more reactive, and
Problem
you're
is with
able
the
to
log
see
file
more.
analysis on some of the customers that you use, these big people, these Apples and Selfridges, is
Mm,
they're big files. Really, there's an awful lot of data in those files, and
yeah.
so probably not so easy to go and have a look at last month's log files. With
No,
site.
the log file analysis that I have done has been on smaller sites for sure.
Yeah.
But it's good to give that more detailed overview of what is happening, because it's important. But yeah, from a crawler perspective, I'd say Deep Crawl, Screaming Frog, definitely good to understand what's happening. There are some plugins that people can use with Chrome as well. Obviously they're not exactly crawler plugins, but they kind of give you top line overview if you want to check some stuff. And also Chrome Developer Tools. It's not really a crawler, but Chrome Developer Tools does give you some more insight in terms of, the back end, the
Yeah.
HTML. You can edit stuff. You can really kind of understand and see, and you can change device and see how things are looking from a responsive view. So yeah, there's a lot of good tools out there.
So I wanted to finish up with asking a question about how you assess how you want and how you actually do assess the effects of changes that you make. What kind of feedback loops do you have at your disposal to say, right, okay, we've made this change on a server, or we've added this
hmm
script here. Do you always have time to assess the change, or do you just a lot of the
hmm
time have it say, well, that's fixed that, so we can just move on?
No, I do a lot of impact analysis, and I guess because some of the work that I do is a lot more technical now. So if there's been a technical release that we fed into particularly, and we say that if you do this release, that it's going to give an SEO benefit of X or whatever, I would give it maybe 1 to 3 months, depend what the release is, right? Depends what impact we're expecting. And then I guess it depends. So I'm trying to think of one that was done recently. If we've made a massive update to, like meta descriptions, for example, or
Hmm.
something, we may look at, click-through rate. I think for every release, you're going to have to understand what you think the impact should be. And then
Hmm.
that's my first point of call. But yeah, I definitely would say that with anything that I do, there needs to be some part of impact analysis. Otherwise, it's a bit pointless. Why are we fixing things? I guess there's
But
a
the
there's
difficult
a
isn't it, the difficult thing though with that is that it depends on the cadence with which you do releases, though, because and of course the cadence with which Google does updates, but because you can make a change, and then 1 to 3 months later potentially you've made a dozen other changes and Google's done 3 updates, and so does that nullify a lot of the impact analysis, or is that just part for the course and you've got to go with it anyway because there's no other choice?
yeah, I guess, I mean, if anything's broken, you got to fix it, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's about, sometimes there are fixes that just need fixing, and you're not necessarily going to see an impact, but you know that if you don't fix it, the consequences will be more detrimental.
Mm.
So if something's broken, say if you've got loads of broken pages, it may not necessarily have a massive boost on performance, but you just know it's just bad practice to have broken pages. But if there's a massive impact of, page, let's take page speed for example. Core Web Vitals are always going to be a thing. Page speed is always going to be a massive thing, especially with the mobile index only and all the the focus on mobile and things like that. So I think page speed is a project that I'm constantly working on, and I'm constantly reviewing of, okay, cool, we've done this now. What's the load time now on this page? How many seconds have we scratched off or etched
Mhm.
off and things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think you just got to kind of do it case by case and understand what fixes you're doing that are going to have an impact. And if
Yep.
it does have an impact, then it's about because I think with all the fixes that I put through personally, we always set a bit of a KPI of understanding what are we trying to achieve with this. There's no point in suggesting to fix this if we don't have a KPI, and then
So you've got
you then
something
look
to
at those
measure
metrics.
after the event.
Yeah.
You got something to measure after the event. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Kara, honestly, I know we've had some technical challenges on this one, but this has been thoroughly interesting, and I'd love to talk more. And hopefully you don't mind if I reach out on LinkedIn as well, because I think
No, of
you're a
course.
very interesting person, and if we're ever at a conference, I'd love to buy you a beer or a wine or whatever. But David, what are you? What's going on next time on the Knowledge Panel show?
Sure. Okay. Well, next time we're actually back to Mondays. We were broadcasting live on a Wednesday this time because it was Bank Holiday Monday in the UK and probably many other places around the world as well. So next time it's going to be Monday, the 16th of May. We're going to be talking about SEO in Spanish versus SEO in English. We've got 4 great guests booked for that one already. Adelina Bordea, Philippia Gasper, Gemma Fontani, and Montse Cano. So just go to theknowledgepanelshow.com, sign up to watch that one live. If you can join us live, that will be superb.
Okay, and I haven't spent any time talking about our sponsors in links, so hi in links. Thanks for being on the show. It's all right. It's they can't sack me. I'm the CEO. But that's it, guys. See you on the next episode, and thank you very much for coming along. And Kara, again, thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you for having me.